Hello and welcome to Geek All Trades Podcast.
Your podcast for all things geeky. I'm Greg Barlow.
And I'm Douw Pretorius.
And today you're joining us to lick some brushes as the brush lickers.
Which might be a bit of a strange one for anyone who's not familiar with like the wargaming miniature tabletop sort of thing there.
I mean, you gotta keep your brush points
Yeah.
nice and pointy, right? You
can't exactly, and avoid licking the washes at all costs because they taste terrible.
I wonder if they specifically made them taste terrible for that very reason.
I think it's just like the thing of like trying to get like that it stays in the recesses, because I mean like the contrast paints don't taste the same, but like it's still not as bad. Like remember Devil and Mud? Devil and Mud was the worst.
But we'll be getting to that section in a little bit, and maybe we'll rate the paints from 1 to 10 of best tasting.
That'd be an interesting one.
And in the process, give you tips on how we go about painting and the techniques we're using nowadays. Be they more casual, relaxed techniques, or trying to get to high quality level minis.
Indeed, yeah. There's a little bit for everyone, and like I think a little bit of everything for wargaming locally, because it's a wide ranging, and you know I think depending on the system, certain systems demand more, and certain systems you're just like, I need to paint up 100 orcs. If only. Could you imagine? Someone needs to paint and like the orc. What's it like? It needs to be like Saruman spawning pit green. It's like.
So anyways, but first, what are you drinking tonight, Douw?
Tonight is a glass of Life from Stone, which is a Springfield wine.
It looks delightful. I myself have some Royal Flush gin mixed with some pink tonic water. You can't quite see it's pink.
I mean, you can. It's getting like done in the ring light.
The ring light makes it. Yeah. So cheers.
Cheers.
Refreshing gin.
Refreshing white wine.
Yeah. So now that we are both well refreshed, perhaps we should move on to continue our story of a wild news headline appearing. And if you remember, our brave heroes had just finished their gym of the it was like a cyberpunk fog gym or something.
It was because it was the ninja gym because of the poison, and
that was exactly it.
Because we went to because the city was what was it?
It was some cyberpunk
electro pink or something like that.
Yeah. So keen-eyed Pokemon players, if we were paralleling such games, would remember.
It's clearly coincidence.
That this would be the point where you unlock Surf and can then surf across to Cinnabar Island. But in this case, I'm just going to keep it easy so we can remember for the next episode. It's Cinnamon Island.
Yeah.
Because that way we won't forget.
No.
So how are you getting across the water? What are you teaching to surf?
Oh, that's a good point there. Do we keep with the cyberpunky theme, or do we go with like something cinnamony?
I mean, both options are very open to you.
It's true, and I can't use my Segway because that's definitely just going to drown.
Yeah, it's definitely not an ocean-going vehicle, Segway.
That's. We'll just land Bodie McBoatface.
Yes, Bodie McBoatface, the old reliable.
Yeah.
So the boat starts going, and it's a tiny little dinghy thing because that's what they actually called Bodie McBoatface.
Well, Bodie McBoatface is the research sub, the unmanned sub. So you just surf on the top.
Yeah, on the top. Just hope it doesn't dive at any stage.
Yeah, I mean. If we're doing our parallels into the Pokemon universe, surfing on Pokemon must be like damn scary.
You do have the filter mask, so you can like breathe underwater for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
That's actually the surf thing. It's literally just a breathing mask that you can survive underwater
and make RGB. Thanks, Razor.
And as you're sort of going along these waves, heading towards Cinnamon Island, there's plenty of like other people in the waters, But the thing that catches your eye is just above you, the spaceship like flies past. Because your first headline is 5 years later, No Man's Sky finally has a positive Steam review.
Oh wow, that did take a little while, hey?
Yeah,
They got really bombed for fair reasons when they initially released. So,
but all credit to them. They've now released up to 17 free game altering and changing updates.
Yeah.
So they've kept at it.
And some of those are really like impressive, like big updates. I mean, a lot of them were stuff that they promised initially from the bat, but yeah, it's good. Like I think pretty much like all the promises are in place these days, sort of thing. So
yeah, not only have they fulfilled all their promises, they've also developed additional content as they've gone along. So for a non-subscription game, I'm impressed.
Yeah. I think they like kind of had to get that back. It's interesting because they released like a little like sort of like side scroller game in the meantime as well.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's quite cutesy, but like cutesy dark. So always a fun combo. I can't actually remember off the top of my head.
What's the name of the studio? Can you remember that? I don't even have that in my notes.
I don't have that in my mind. Yeah. Check my let's check my Steam.
It's not so important. They're actually not big enough that they like stick in my head like glue.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like they released it's a small like little side scroller. It's pretty quick and fun sort of thing within it. It was more like almost like a tech demo-y kind of thing initially, but they changed it up and just kind of like we can play around with this. And then the actual game. I mean, like No Man's Sky is obviously taken up a lot of their time, and it's always on special at the moment. Like it's I can never find it like not 30% off, like for 30% of the price sort of like thing these days.
It's that whole game development cycle thing where if you wait for how many years is it? 5 years?
No. Like it's literally 3 months. 3 months. Any AAA title will go on 50% off. On sale, like it's the golden rule. It won't stay at 50%, but like the first sale is within 3 months, and it's just like, okay, why am I pre-ordering? Like for certain games, it makes sense. Obviously, like you want to get that first weekend hype of the first person shooter or MMO expansion release or etc. But for other games, you're just like, it's a single player experience. I'm gonna wait for the gold edition or the game of the year edition and just get all the DLC and half the price.
Cool. And all of the patches that fix all of the bugs.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like with No Man's Sky, I mean, I'm sure that's exactly the case at the moment. The current version of the game is everything it was supposed to be, and I think that's kind of cool. It's a good story when like that happens, because I mean you hear enough devs where they're just like, no, we're gonna release this buggy game, and they never come back to it, and it's just gone. So
and if you compare it to a lot of other like AAA titles, there's not very many games that can say they've gotten to the stage where they've redeemed themselves from an early launch or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know, just like talking about like Steam things, and I don't know if it's going to be a possible future news article, so let me hope. But did you see that there's a game called like the Summer of 57? I think it's called.
No, I haven't.
So it's a horror game. It's only 2 hours long, but like it takes like an hour and a half to finish. But it's done really well. So it's got overwhelmingly positive reviews. But because it's only an hour and a half long, a lot of people have been buying it, playing it, finishing it, and then refunding it because it doesn't fit into that 2 hour gap there. And the developer was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna stop developing games because this has been pretty bad. Fortunately there was a big like outcry around that afterwards, and people were like, no, we're gonna buy your game, and like a whole bunch of people bought his game, sort of like thing. Yeah, because it is really it's a really well done game by like a single person sort of thing for it, and the fact that it's only 90 minutes suits it. It works for it. So,
it literally is in the title.
yeah. Well, there's Summer of 57, so like it's a bit of a weird one with it. But like, it's very like, come on, why do this? Why leave like an overwhelmingly positive? You've had this like thing, a really good thing, and you're gonna refund it.
Yeah, some people I don't understand in this world, but no. And I mean, also it's probably at indie prices, right? So it's like $100 or something. So
exactly.
It's not even like you broke the bank to buy it. So.
Nah, exactly. It's just
pay the bucks. It's like buying a movie ticket.
it's
same
cheaper than a
duration.
movie. Same than it's cheaper than a movie ticket. Like sort of
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Like we'll see how that all like turns out in the end with it. But
Yeah. Hopefully it has
I like that. But I mean, it's interesting to see of like these sort of ratings and the Steam ratings. Like honestly, like the Steam ratings more often than not feel more appropriate than like a Metacritic rating or other sort of like things because
Yeah.
it's living
Mm-hmm.
and there's a much more like stronger community like feel around it. So that whole like I found this useful or I didn't find this useful or
Yes.
etc. So yeah,
those mini reviews as well are really handy. I find when you like scroll down, and then a lot of the time someone will say, "I really enjoyed this game, but and then this is
I
why
would
I'm
wait
giving
for like this
it."
patch sort of thing, or that's good. And I think like it'd be interesting to read those like modern day reviews of No Man's Sky now, just to kind of see like what's actually come out from it and be like, oh yeah, this is actually kind of cool.
Especially seeing as they've overcome that massive dip of negative review, like pushing themselves up.
Actually, like pushing themselves out like mixed is actually quite impressive. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the spaceship flies past, so you don't really get a chance to. It's going on its way to the up and ups.
I give it a thumb up.
Yeah, you give it a thumb up, and as a result, it drops out this little indie game that it's developed in its time for you to catch.
Yeah, indie
and
games.
to keep yourself busy on the way to Cinnamon Island, which is known for its massive volcano of cinnamon, I guess.
Oh my.
Because that's Cinnamon Island.
So it was like claimed by the British and colonized with spices.
Yes, spices.
or it's a Atreides like outpost.
Well, actually, it's been given over to the Harkonnen now. The Ordos, because they never got a chance.
Yeah.
But anyways, so you find yourself on Cinnamon Island. And you actually go straight to the gym because Cinnamon Island is actually very small.
It is.
And it's like a little Pokemon Center, a few little things, and a big mansion. Yeah, a big mansion, which has the gym in the basement.
Yes.
So you head on to the Poke Mansion and down into, as you're about to enter the gym, you push open the gym doors. And inside, it's very tropical because in this place, it's normally a fire gym in other IPs.
Yeah.
But in here, it is a crypto gym.
Ooh.
Because the next heading is El Salvador becomes the first country to adopt Bitcoin as an official currency.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like they're an interesting country. A lot of stuff there. It's to try and like get themselves away from having to use the dollar, as far as I understand. I watched a very interesting video on it on a channel called what's Economics Explained.
Oh, cool!
That's been like my new YouTube discovery. Where it's this Aussie guy who kind of goes through the economics of different countries and kind of goes through all the basics of like this is why like Ireland is one of the only countries in the EU that's had a positive GDP growth, or why has Monaco got like sort of like things, or what's the kind of like thing of like Hong Kong. He did a really interesting series on the economy of Eve as well. So
okay, that's
so
cool.
yeah, I've been quite enjoying those ones.
I've actually seen the video and then like meant to go back to it but never found it again.
That's such as being on YouTube. But no, like it's interesting that they've done that because they don't have a currency of their own. Like they're tied to the dollar, as far as I understand. And by choosing that as an acceptable thing, it kind of like breaks that a little bit more as well.
So it's quite risky.
It is. It is.
I have very little control over it.
This orange costs 0.00001 of a Bitcoin. Okay, no, sorry, it costs 0.000.2 of a Bitcoin.
So another interesting statistic about Salvador is 70% of Salvadorians don't own a bank account. So that's another like what?
E-wallets, Greg, e-wallets.
And 23% of their GDP comes from Salvadorians living abroad sending money back.
Yeah.
Which is part of why they've gone with this move, because they want to move away from dollars.
And it's interesting. I think there was also a thing in there. If you donate a Bitcoin to the government, they'll give you residency.
Oh, I didn't hear that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Um, but it's a lot of money.
It is. That is a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
But I mean, like it's similar money. Like it's a similar amount of money that you would pay for citizenship in like Spain, because like
That's
Spain, if
true.
you buy property, you become an EU citizen. So
Mm.
it's effectively like kind of very similar things there. And I mean, like their taxes and such in Salvador are, let's say, quite lenient.
Yeah,
So,
and now there's cryptocurrency. So if you're doing anything
yeah.
dodgy, you can just keep.
Well, I mean, like I think they're also like one of those countries that also has like a very like not strong extradition pacts with various places. So yeah, yeah, but yeah,
But yeah, I wonder if it's going to catch. Oh, first of all, I don't know how. It seems more like a gimmick to me currently than an
well,
actual, because you can't really. How is your average El Salvadorian going to use
the crypto.
Bitcoin in an everyday
Yeah,
transaction?
I think it's them. It's like a bet by the government, kind of just be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, we're gonna be at the
Early
forefront of
adoption.
this, and we'll adopt this, and this will be the thing, which is difficult because you've got like the Americans clamping down on crypto. The Chinese have been just all over crypto at the moment. So it's difficult. And I mean, like, crypto is good for a lot of things, but it's sort of like the ultimate sort of laissez-faire currency. But also that means that the government's kind of like, no, we need to be able to do this. And you can understand why it's being cracked down in like places like China, where they kind of fudge their currency to kind of keep it strong, well, keep it weak, so that they're importing and exporting sort of thing is always strong. So you could kind of see that being of there, but also just the autonomy of it, of being able to like be like, well, we kind of need to keep our inflation at 2%, 3%, and if we switch over to a cryptocurrency, it's kind of now market driven entirely, which could take it up to like ridiculous percentages.
Crypto crashed again.
So,
oh, it's back to normal.
well, I mean, it's interesting with there, because I mean, like I sold mine some Ethereum earlier in the year, and like that's back up to being like really strong again. So I'm like,
yeah, no,
like this is fine.
In February, it's like, oh god, why? And now it's like, oh yay.
Yeah. Oh,
so next year February. Oh god, why?
Yeah. So there's like memes around it with like the I forget which movie it is. Just that scene where it's like all the guys in the gallows, and the guy just like turns out it's like first time here. So
yes, yeah.
There's also, I mean, it's just like, first time cryptos and like experienced cryptos are just like, yeah, no, this happens, I suppose. But yeah, it's interesting. There's also just like, so speaking again on that sort of thing, that channel went over like the economy of Iceland, and something like 30% of their economy is crypto mining, because they don't need to cool their stuff, and their power is something like the cheapest power in the world. So they're like, oh, well, that's just fine.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like a natural resource for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, we'll just turn our steam power into electric power, which will then mine crypto with, and we don't need to pay for like horrible like cooling, because we'll just
leave the window
Iceland.
Leave the window open, and then you don't have to pay for a heating bill because your house stays warm.
Exactly. So it's this really weird sort of thing there. I can understand entirely why it's become that like way, but
yeah, it's quite funny.
Kind of makes you want to like buy a warehouse in Iceland, just to like cram with like crypto.
You'd think like Russia would also be pretty good at it.
Well, I mean, it is, but the government like
regulates
quite a sort of feeling within there. But I mean, that's probably also a whole bunch like sources for a lot of the sort of like nefarious things.
Yeah, that's all the dodgy crypto mine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so how are you beating the crypto gym leader? He's called blockchain.
Oh. I tell him he's just a buzzword that's used in every IT meeting and not a real like use to anybody.
My friends call me, and he swings like a block on a chain at you.
Yeah. Oh god.
This isn't crypto mining at all.
Need to educate him. I'll then teach him the reasons of why he shouldn't be a crypto miner in a volcano. His energy costs
too warm here to be mining crypto.
Yeah.
he's like, but I thought fire types would help. I'm a terrible crypto miner. And he is defeated by his own purposes as the cinnamon volcano erupts, spraying cinnamon into the air.
Oh no.
Drifting it down in a soft haze so that everyone's waffles have a lovely cinnamon.
I was going to say, it's like fairly a milk tart.
Oh, yeah. Sprinkles, sprinkles.
It's have like the bakeries, just have it like all lined up and waiting for the eruptions.
And you get yourself your second last badge in this region, the crypto badge.
Nice.
Which you have to unlock with a specific key, only to you.
Yeah. It's like an e-wallet. You have to show it. You have to like open your e-wallet and be like,
it's worth. Its value changes, constantly.
Yeah.
So sometimes it helps with not Pokemon, with headlines, and other times it doesn't at all.
So sorry, you cannot face the Elite Four today.
Yeah, not today.
The crypto badge isn't worth it. Yeah. You get 5 chances against the Elite Four today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to celebrate, you take your milk tart, get a sprinkling, and head out to the beach and have a lovely day on the beach. And as you have a lovely day on the beach, you're suddenly hit by a random encounter.
Oh no.
Because this beach is known for a famous thing that, in fact, has been a previous episode title before. Ooh. For this is the beach where you would normally find Missing No.
Oh no.
Oh
no.
Everything glitches out a bit. Reality flickers, and you face your last headline, which is that Yogscast has invested in a gaming cafe chain called Chance Encounters in England.
That's interesting. Like they're doing a lot of businessy stuff in this last year, because like they've got like their podcast network, they've got their game studio properly set up as well. So yeah, no, I doubt we'll see York Ventures, but
you never know. Yeah. No, it's in their contracts. They can't talk about it.
They can't talk about it. We can.
So apparently they invested a 6-figure sum in pounds, which is quite a lot of pounds.
That's quite a lot of pounds.
And it's a gaming chain as well. It's not just one store.
Okay.
With Chance Encounters. That seems to be like they call themselves a gaming cafe, but they seem to be more board game inclined, like where you go in and they've got a whole lot of board games and you can just go and play.
Yeah.
Which it's an interesting move in these times, like.
Yeah. Probably they got a really good, like it would have been a 7-figure instead of a 6-figure, because of the times.
Well, apparently this figure is going to help them open a branch in Bristol.
Okay.
Yeah, as well, which makes sense.
Makes sense.
That's where Yogscast is based, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
And for also those who don't know, Yogscast is a pretty famous. They're actually multi-million dollar valued gaming syndicate, I guess.
Yes, syndicate is the right word for it. It's weird to think of.
Yeah, like YouTube channels and stuff that'll
primarily British, came out of like the early Minecraft boom.
And
kind of have moved away from that for the most part.
They're probably mostly known now for the Jingle Jam, I guess, every year.
Yeah, I would say so.
Because that's a massive charity event they have where they raise it's like in the millions.
It is, and millions of pounds as well towards like a lot of charities. So
and you can even pick your charity when you donate to it, which I found really cool because
because it's like that's very
thing that is quantifying. Like
and I mean like it is also nice for us who are international to do that because you don't necessarily want to be like, oh well, I'm going to support this British charity because it doesn't really affect like our lives as much.
Yeah,
but it's nice to kind of see like some of like the things in there. I know like one of the big ones is like just sort of like helping out with disabled people's playing games, which was like a lot regardless.
Like the cool one I saw was the money last year when I donated went towards it gave a girl a bionic arm.
Oh, that's cool.
So that and then you actually got to see her get the bionic arm and stuff.
Yeah. She was like on one of their podcast episodes, or like one of their like episodes. Like she came through the offices, and just kind of showed it off. So there's a lot of cool things coming out of there. I mean, like they're a decent group. They're very inclusive, and they've had a little bit of controversy in the last 2 years, but
but they handled
it well because they kicked out all the controversial people, and we're
They
like,
were literally
yeah,
just
no,
like,
we're not going to protect them. We're going to get rid of them. You
Yeah.
know, so that's been always a good thing to see with them there. Interesting to see, like as you say, like it's a weird thing in the current times, but
it might be like you say, it might be like really foresight, future planning.
It's a buyer's market, Greg.
Yeah, it's a buyer's market.
Yeah.
Now's the time to get in and invest in your local game stores, everyone.
Yeah. But you know, I think it's interesting. The UK obviously had a better market for those kinds of things. What was it like? I wonder if they still have that. So Yahtzee from like The Escape is still open up a whole bunch of franchise of bars called like, what are they like? Something Mana. I forget what it was called, but it was also some, like,
those really cool ones with the make your own builder character sheet.
Yeah.
Those are really cool.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I mean, like America have a bunch of them all over the show as well, not necessarily of that brand, but like of different things. So it's cool to see. I am very jealous of them. Obviously, it's one of those things. I'm like, oh man, that'd be really cool. Like, yeah, we've got places like the Nexus or favorite local gaming store, etc. But it's not quite like the same sort of like, yeah, I'm gonna go out and grab a couple of drinks with friends and just board game or whatever. You know? It's I'll go out and play some Magic because that's another thing here, or some of the things I'm like not really get a drink because drinks licenses are difficult.
Look, I think that's what the Nexus is leaning towards, but has been hit quite hard with the current times, right? So because cats had to move on, they just closed down.
Yeah, exactly. Which is such a sad thing.
Yeah. Gonna miss those sweet potatoes. So good.
Yeah, potato skins. And,
I wasn't ready.
I wasn't either. That's like university days, like 101,
man. But yeah, hopefully they recover well and things pick up as the world heals slowly.
With any sore arms. Yes.
But yeah, so that's what the Ogscast is up to. It's quite interesting. Also interesting fact, they're Jingle Jam this year is their 10th anniversary one. So it's big, but
fancy.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Keep an eye out for it. Maybe we'll bring it up in a later episode when it's closer to the time.
Sure, we will.
Over the course of December.
Yeah, it's always a good one.
Yeah, so how are you dealing with Missing No, who currently has been invested by Ogscast money?
Well, I can just show them how like early I subscribed to their channel and my donations to the Jingle Jam and buying their albums off of Bandcamp. It'd be like, I'm a fanboy as well.
You nearly didn't have it, but the albums on Bandcamp got you in. And Missing No just like glitches out and vanishes to go and torment some other person who doesn't donate to charity.
It's important, man. Charity is important. And not only for your tax return that you get at the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't even claim
them. Yeah,
that's just not but yeah, so that's Missing No on the East Coast for those who wondered where Missing No came from. If you ever want to seek it out, East Coast of Cinnamon Island. Yeah,
a great way to infinitely spawn totally mistress balls. Ooh.
It sounds a lot more saucy.
It does.
But yeah, that brings us to the end of Wild News Headline.
Indeed.
So perhaps we should head on over to our main topic. Get our paintbrushes ready, open up our color of choice, pair our wet palette if you're using such a thing.
Should.
And maybe even that's a good place to start.
That is a good place to start. Wet palettes, man. Because
why would we use one?
So, particularly for like South Africans, and especially up here in the High Veld, a wet palette is almost a must-have. Like for years, I didn't use it. And you just go through so much more paint than is necessary. So wet palette, for those who are unfamiliar, it is a palette. So a palette is something where you put your paint on in order to mix or and in general, you know, like if you've ever seen like Bob Ross working, the thing that he's holding in his hand and taking the paint off of, that's a palette.
Do you know I use an ice cream tub?
Yeah, so like I somewhere around
And mine's
here, but it's like
downstairs,
a
so I can't
lid
even
of
reach.
like an old like water like container.
Yeah,
So like it was
exactly.
turned upside down, and that was the palette. Because plastic, and using we generally use acrylic paints for
Yeah.
miniature painting. You can use others, but I think acrylic is the more standard and just
Yeah,
more easily available locally. But yeah, so you have a palette, and now normally you put your paint on there, you would then use it and kind of like apply it on each
exactly.
model. So you don't want to straight into the pot because, oh my god, how
Way
much
too
paint
much
you have putting on your
concentrated paint.
brush.
That's how you get
The,
those really thick. You see those pictures of those really thick
yes,
space
glob
marines,
space marines,
floppy,
like with like
floppy marines.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
if you just paint straight from the pot, that's what you're gonna get.
yeah, exactly.
Tip number
So
one.
yes,
We need to like have a start. Ching! Tip number one.
yeah,
Don't paint from the pot.
yeah, no, never. Fortunately, avoided that ever, but
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I never fell into that trap.
Yeah, but it's a common enough trap. Like, don't feel ashamed. Like,
Yeah,
another
you would
big thing with
assume it
all
would
of these.
like a
Yeah,
thing,
I
right?
mean, with a lot of these things, I think a lot of people dive into model painting, and
Mm.
the thing that always helps me for like thinking about it, I don't know if you've seen Duncan Rhodes's video of repainting his first model,
Yes, where he
and he
shows
shows what his
memory.
first Space
Yeah.
Marine ever looked like, and it is Blob Marine,
Yeah.
and he shows like he goes to the process of holding it up in his current one, and he's insane because I
He's
don't know
done
how
good
many
road.
decades of like thing he's had, but yeah. So so you use a palette for that, obviously, to get
Mm.
like your paints sort of like at a consistency that you want to use,
Mhm.
but particularly in dry environments with like thin air, like so
Mhm.
Joburg or Pretoria or a lot of
Or
like
any other
big
high
or
altitude
any high
city in the
altitude
world.
place in there.
Mm.
Yeah, your paint dries out so quickly, and that's advantageous because your models dry a lot quicker, and you can get like between your stages a lot quicker.
Mm.
But it doesn't help with things like wet blending or mixing your own color and using more
Yeah.
of it, or just having a decent amount of paint in your palette that you can kind of
Hmm.
go back to
Yeah.
and use.
If you
So
ever find yourself reaching down to your palette and that blob of paint you had there is just dried, and you're like, but I've only been painting for 5 minutes.
yeah,
The wet palettes are for you.
yes, which yeah, like it's life changing, and you don't necessarily have to go and buy one. You
Yeah,
can make your own. They are DIY, and DIY ones work pretty well. I know a
100%.
number of painters who make use of DIY ones. A good tin that can seal and keep the air out, and you're good to go.
Yeah, like I
But
said, I use an ice cream tub.
yeah, so I have a red grass wet palette
Huh?
because I was like I will get a
Yeah,
decent
you
one.
wanted to invest in something
Yeah,
fancy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean it's nice, and then you can nowadays get them from. So I got mine from Supernova Studios,
Mhm.
but Pandemonium Games have
Hmm.
now partnered up with the importers who bring those kinds of things
Yes, I
in.
saw that. Noticed.
So Green Stuff World and Red Grass and all those things now being stocked there. So it's even more being able to use that. And
So
it's a
describe
really
the red
Red
grass one
Grass.
to me. I don't know what the difference is between a store bought one and like, because I know how to make one from scratch out of like friendly household components.
So I'll describe for the listeners so that
Yeah,
I can save the viewers
yeah, go
something
ahead.
that is it there.
Ooh.
It has magnet attachments for it, so if you want to put
Uh,
like extra things in the size, they've got like pot holders and extra like
uh,
those slots and stuff. It's quite cool.
nice.
And then the main thing about it, so to explain, it looks like a Tupperware.
Mhm.
This has got a
Like an ice
thing.
cream tub
Yeah,
almost.
yeah. It's got a rubber seal around it to kind of lock it
Huh?
in.
Yeah,
And then the actual paint sort of like
there
thing,
we go.
it's got like so they've got their own like sort of like paper and sort of stuff with it.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is they've got a sponge at the bottom of it,
Mhm.
and that said sponge is ridiculous at retaining water. Like
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's
it's
the
a super
fancy.
extreme one. So
That's the pristine
yeah,
pro level painter version. We're going to call it. And my
yeah,
ghetto version, the you can do it at home version, is I
yeah,
take a strip of roller towel for my sponge,
yep.
and I put it at the bottom of my ice cream tub, and I take a strip
Wax
of
paper.
like wax baking
Yeah,
paper,
yeah.
and I layer that on. Oh, first I add water to the roller towel to make a nice damp roller
Mhm.
towel, and then I put wax paper on top. And it's the same effect, but not nearly as cool for storage with magnets for cool accessories and
Yeah, I mean, like
the ghetto version.
saying like you don't need it sort of thing.
Yeah, but it's
We
really
know
nice to
several
have.
players who do have that. It is really nice to have sort of thing there, and not too expensive. I think it's like 350 rand,
Yeah,
so not
it's
bad,
like buying a
honestly.
fancy Tupperware.
Yeah. So it works. It also seals really nicely. Keeps your paints going for a while, and it's great for blending. So if
Mm.
you're trying to get like that color that's it's a little bit more green than you wanted it to be, or a flesh tone that's sort of between the two colors that you're using. Wet palettes are perfect for it because you can mix it up, and you don't even have to remember the ratios that you use because it's just going to stay there for as long as you keep it wet. So,
and like this is the point where so a lot of the times online you'll see a thing that says thin your paints, right? So this is where this is how you avoid painting straight from the pot. Is you apply like one dollop of paint from the pot, and then as much water as you want to thin your paints, depending on what you're trying to achieve.
And the nice thing about wet palettes is generally is that you can just kind of place it on the palette, and the moisture from there is usually more than enough to kind of keep it at a good consistency. Certain chalkier paints you don't want as much, other ones that have very strong pigments you want to add more. But
I find in my ghetto palette I've got to at least add equal parts paint and water at the same time.
So like
often I'll add more water even because I generally want it much thinner than.
So with the built for spec ones, the water sort of retention through it is strong enough that in general I can just be like, okay, I'll take it straight from there, and it's good enough. If as I said, for certain things that have stronger pigments, I'll water it down more. But
I mean, each painting task is its own task.
It's true, and I mean, like you only learn that by experience and playing around with
practice.
Yeah, well, which I mean, like brings us like the other thing over there, like don't be afraid to start. Like I think one of the biggest things of being a painter or whatever is like you see the Golden Demon Award things, and you're just like, I will never do that.
Yeah, I believe the meme is snaps brushes in half.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like it's really a thing of practicing, getting that fine motor control, and just keeping on doing it. Like I think if you really want to just like ask the person that like is introducing you into it, or someone that you know, just be like, can you show me your first model? And they'll be like, oh, it's shameful, but okay.
Look away.
Just ask the first time someone paints eyes.
Oh, I still can't get eyes quite right. Like I'm still forever disappointed with my eyes. And a lot of the time I'm just like, you know what, this model, it's got like nice shadows in there for my washes. He's just looking very blinky. It's fine. He doesn't need actual pupils. It's fine. Although I've been challenging myself a bit more ever since you started posting those really nice eyes. So like friendly local WhatsApp group. I'm like, need to get better at eyes.
It's just as I say, practicing, and I think leading on from there is just finding the right spaces for learning. And that oftentimes that's just like your friends, your fellow like war gamers or tabletop like players at your clubs. But then there's also just a crap ton of like painters out there with a lot of good tutorials, and they range everything. Because I mean, like you can look at like Games Workshop, just their in-house painters. They've like got a very much a good spread of it, because they'll have guys that'll just be like, cool, this is for battle ready, and they'll go through like the very basics, and it'll be like a couple of paints, you won't need too much, let's go, and it'll look good. It won't look like box art good, but it'll look good.
But I mean, it'll be all of the colors you need, and it'll be even slightly better than. So there's that whole battle ready base colors thing. But in my mind, that's like literally just the base layer of everything. It's not even, you haven't even washed,
contrast,
you haven't dry brushed, not anything. You've just literally put 3 colors on 3 parts of the model so that it looks like kind of how it should, but isn't quite painted yet in my mind. And like almost 8 out of 10 times, if you want to paint a specific model and you curious as to the techniques to do so, you can generally just YouTube that model's name, painting, and somebody will be painting it online.
And I mean, it doesn't even have to be the official like things. So like I mentioned the Games Workshop stuff, and they're really good for their model line. But I mean, like if you're grabbing an Infinity model or a Kingdom Death model or any number, because like there's like everything in between, someone out there has a tutorial for it, or for that army, or for a very similar thing that you can pick out. And I kind of alluded to earlier, obviously we were using acrylic paints. There's people who use oil paints. And there's guides for that as well. They scare me. It's like my like current thing is I'm just looking at like oil washes and just being like, I want to try it, but it's so scary. So and I think like there's always space to learn new things within it, and I think even there, just admitting it, like they're like, I paint to a fairly high level, and there's techniques that scare me, and that I'm also just like kind of like, this is daunting. So I think like anyone should feel okay with it being like, well, it feels really daunting to get my first model with like white armor. Trust
Oh
me,
yeah,
everyone goes through that.
the white
Like,
armor phase.
or just like the first time you start painting with like yellows, and you're just like realize this is awful. Why are yellow paints the worst to work with?
Yep.
And on the
Why did I
reverse
pick
side, like
London?
yeah, well, like on the reverse side, like the reds and blues, which have such strong pigments that you make errors when you're first starting, and yet like you feel like, oh, this is the worst, but it's not actually as bad as you think. And I mean, like, again, everyone saw it somewhere. Everyone had like their first army. Everyone has their kind of thing, and to get a thing out, yeah, no one's going to be like, wow, they're going to be like, cool, you painted your model. That's so awesome. Like, how many gray lords do we know?
Yeah, actually, there's only a few.
Fewer.
There's a few, and I have it on good records that they maybe are trying to change their ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's more open to us because of all these things. And I mean, we spoke a little bit about it, like contrast paints. Contrast paints are amazing.
Yeah, they're great. They're literally, so in your normal painting steps, for those who don't know, contrast paints were released by Games Workshop about 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
A good number of years ago
now. A blur now.
Yeah, I know.
And normally in your painting steps, you would do like a base layer and then like a shade layer and then highlights and some dry brushing and
yeah. So it's the thing of it is the technical sort of art people is you start with a mid-tone and then you darken all the areas and you brighten up all the shinier, so like raised edges. And yeah, that process can take a while, and that's what, like 4 or 5 different paints in order to do that. Whereas a contrast paint
cuts out two, like generally combines 2 of the steps, I guess. It's the sort of base and
it's about wash. 3, because I mean, like you do base, wash, and a little bit of highlight.
Yeah, so
just the first touches of it.
I've moved over to using contrast a lot, and I find sometimes it can definitely do that 3rd step.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times I'll need to still go through, and that's the sort of my starting point after the contrast.
Yeah, I find that especially with flesh tones. If flesh tones are like very good for getting the dark, but the light becomes a bit like splotchy on the like tops of parts. Their reds are great, their blues are great, the greens are actually pretty good.
Yeah, like I find all of the colors are very vibrant in the contrast range, which I was missing in their base paint range. I mean, they sort of had the bright colors, but it never came out as vibrant as the contrasts do for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's
or just the balance of color or something. I've been able to up my vibrancy of my paints.
You probably also base sprayed different colors. You didn't use did you use the white that like before?
9 times out of 10, I'm Corax white basing.
Okay.
Because I prefer that. I hate basing in black. When I first started painting, I based in black.
Same.
Because I was like, now I don't have to do that horrible recess painting, of like all the other like gibbly bits. I can just paint the outsides and it's fine.
It's not.
But then one day, I was at a friend's house and I'd assembled a model, but I didn't bring any base spray. And I was like, can I borrow your base spray? He's like, yeah, sure, borrow some white. I'm like, oh man, white? And like I sprayed it white. And then I went and I started painting. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much easier. You have to do like a million layers of paint to get the color I want.
Yeah, it's interesting with it because like white obviously like pops things a lot more. It's nice to your bright colors, so your reds and sort of stuff. Whereas like the darker one, you'll go for like blues and greens if you want to add like that sort of darker look to it, the grimier sort of stuff. I think that's also interesting one of like base paints as well. Like just talking about like when I started, I didn't base paint at all. I didn't base coat at all. I just
onto the gray,
onto the thing, onto the gray, and it shows. But these days you've got more options with there. On the side of like going back to like the Citadel line, they've got their rattle cans, and their rattle cans are in colors that are like very close or are the same as a lot of armors or a lot of like things, and work as a primer all in one. So you don't need to go like Prime and Go. You can just be like,
Yeah.
well, I've got a blue Space Marine army. I'm just gonna use the McCrag blue spray, and you're
Yeah,
done.
so we were discussing yellows earlier, and
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
my
the
saving
Yandin
grace
yellow. Oh,
because my whole Eldar army is a Yandin yellow,
yeah.
and thankfully they've got the base color for that, right?
Yep.
So that saved me so many steps of doing that base layer of yellow to build it up,
Mm,
and then I can just start with a yellow base coat and then sort of build that up with
yeah.
paler and paler yellows, and it's so much easier to work with.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you've got that, but those ones, and they're not terribly expensive, but they are still a little bit of investment in there. It's like 350, whereas I
Look,
mean, like a primer from your like hardware store can be like 50,
yeah.
80.
To be honest, so it's something I've been encountering recently because I sort of there was a stage where it was the G-Dub stuff was kind of out of stock and restocking them was difficult or something. So I sort of experimented out with like the model store prime base paint, which is Tamiya.
The
And
Tamiya
then
paints are good, but they're weird in that you need to not get the plastic ones, you get
yes,
the polycarbonate ones, and they work fine.
exactly. And the same with there's also Rust-Oleum, which is the
Rust-Oleum is the other one.
cheapest hardware store
But
option.
it works really well. Like the black one is particularly good.
Yeah,
But
I've had mixed results with it. That's my problem. Is like one day I'll buy Rust-Oleum because I've actually moved to using Rust-Oleum for my terrain when I'm doing terrain painting because it's the cheapest but quality one.
yeah.
So it's still expensive as far as hardware store spray paint goes, rattle cans
Yes.
go, but it's cheaper than G-Dub stuff.
Yeah.
And it'll be like one day I'll buy a can of it and do all of my terrain and I'll be happy. It'll come out perfect. Mwah. And then the next week, I'll buy the exact same color and exact same rattle can and I'll give it the exact same number of shakes. And then I'll spray and it'll come out like dappled.
Yeah.
Horrible, like splotchy.
I think it's a weird one with there because I mean that's also South African Joburg weather rather.
Yeah, probably.
Like it's always the thing of like you as a painter here, you kind of like look out for like overcast days because then you're like, perfect day for basing.
Yeah, quickly base everything.
Yeah, which is so counterintuitive because like overseas they're always like, no, look for a sunny day with all this. Yeah. You're like, no. If you use any of like the white, like the Corex white spray, it can go bad on a hot day. Like it just immediately particleizes and leaves this horrible rough finish on your models. So yeah, something to look out for. But I think it's nice to see those sort of primer and the built-in primer ones that the Games Workshop have. It's a little bit more expensive, like than other sprays, but it cuts out a lot of the other steps that you would normally do.
Yeah.
And their Chaos Black is like only $250, and one of the best black sprays around. So yeah. You just have to paint over all the black because it's not the same black as their black, which is weird.
Yeah, of course.
But it works for like painting other colors, and if you want to start from like that dark mid-tones.
Yeah, well, look, the only time I use black nowadays as a base is when I do a black and then I do a white on top at an angle
for Zenithal. Yeah. So I mean, interesting on there. I think we both are airbrush owners these days, and that's like one of the things that is a very easy way of getting very cool like technical term of volumes to a model, which is that zenithal highlighting. So you spray initially with a black, and then you go with a white or a gray, and you hit it from a certain angle that you say this is where the light is coming from. That's all you really need to do, and then you do the contrast paints over the top of that, and you're already like better than 90% of most people's models. So there's a lot of like cheap, easy tricks that you can kind of pick out from there. And I mean, like, airbrushes are not cheap. Like,
no,
I think that's like
a lot of effort to maintain.
Yeah, the better quality ones are better. It's that what's it? Sergeant Grimes's boot economics, where the more expensive a thing is, the longer it lasts, and you don't have to replace and stuff, etc.
Yeah,
and it applies with like the hobby, like the painting hobby, very much so. So you can get a cheap air gun, and that's all right for your initial sort of starting of it. It'll work for you.
First few 50 models or so, but it's going to clog fairly quickly, and it's going to require a lot of cleaning to maintain. Trust me, I know. I'm in this camp. I've been meaning to actually upgrade my airbrush for quite a while now.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, I think it's a little bit more difficult. Again, our climate kind of like changes to it. our sort of like thing means that our sort of like the whites, grays, etc., tend to clog a lot more easily,
Mhm.
and you can't use for as long bursts. So and the thinners and stuff are available,
Mm.
but you tend to have to like get the right balance, and there's a lot of experimentation that comes out of
Yeah.
that. We've still got some really good airbrush painters up here.
Mhm.
So again, just ask for advice and stuff within there. A lot
Mm.
of people are like,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
but if you aren't going airbrush, you have regular brushes, and there's a variety of those.
oh yes, yeah. There's plenty. You can go for like the Citadel brushes, which are good.
To
Uh,
me, the little brushes are like perfect for like someone who's they've decided that wargaming or that is for them, and they want a paintbrush that's going to last them a year and a
yeah,
half, sort of thing.
yeah,
And you've learned good brush care.
yeah. That's important.
Before that,
Make sure
like
your brushes are clean at the end of a
yeah,
painting session.
yeah. But before that, just go to what's the what it's left me the art store. Oh, is it
Something
PNA
in
or
Herbert Evans.
Herbert Evans? Looks
Yes.
like there and like a 2 and a 0, and
Mhm.
you're fine.
Yeah, yeah.
you
So
know.
Herbert Evans, look for the art sales at the end of the month. Every
Mhm.
month, at the end of the month, they have an art sale. So
Yeah,
find your local Herbert Evans and ask them when their next sale is.
yeah,
And you can find some really good brushes for an
yeah.
affordable price.
Yeah, like they're very cheap. So thing in comparison, so thing there you're looking at like 30 rand for a brush in comparison to a Games Workshop brush, which is now
Yeah.
like over 100.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
there's other brands like Army Painter does quite good brushes,
army painted brushes are very good, but
but
they're
they are
even more
less forgiving.
expensive.
Yeah, they're more
Like,
expensive and less forgiving if like
don't
you
care for
just
them.
leave it for like you're painting something and you get distracted to go and collect a pizza or something
Yes,
and you come back and you haven't cleaned your
it's
brush
going to be
properly.
sad. Sad times.
Well, good.
Yeah,
Your brush now
but
looks like
they
this.
are,
Kind
they
of
are
thing.
very good. I've recently upgraded my like very fine detail brushes over to them, and it's been amazing to do so.
Yeah.
So I can wholeheartedly suggest it.
Mm.
And then other brushes, like it really depends. So there's a variety of techniques. Obviously, we were talking about earlier of like the shading, and you have particular shade brushes. The
Yeah.
Games Workshop ones are very good for it because they're sort of synthetic and sable hair.
Yeah.
So they get like a good amount of like color on the brush when you do paint them. And their dry brushes are very good as well.
Mm.
But I
Although
mean, like dry brushing, you can just use like any old
I was
brush and
about to
be
say,
fine.
dry brushing, I generally use like the cheapest
Mm.
PNA, like bristle brush that's
Yes, flat
small that I
flat
can
brush
fly.
and just go. Wah.
Yeah, and you just,
Yeah,
you just got to be careful. The concentration of paint on the brush is not too much because then
yeah,
you ruin the bottle.
yeah. But I mean, like that's another one that's that used to be the old cheap technique before contrast paints,
Yep.
and it
Yeah.
still is. Like there's a lot of
Yeah,
like
I
getting
still
like
dry
really
brush.
good, cool effects. Dry
Mm.
brushing works really well.
Yeah. It's like poor
Um,
man's edging.
yeah, yeah. Oh, just thinking about that. Have you ever seen like how oil paints work with edge highlighting?
Mm-mm.
Like they use those like sort of like flat brushes like
Mhm.
that you would use for like a dry brushing, and they use that to edge highlight with oil paints. And I'm just like, it's insane, 'cause it's so delicate, and they're just like la
Yeah,
la la
but
la
they're
la.
still like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh.
Yeah, yeah. So I think interesting things to spot out with there are like things to kind of look forward to.
Mm.
But yeah, brushes are always a thing with there. You don't need to go for like the Kolinsky, whatever special
Yeah,
edition 400
mega
grand ones.
sable 5,000 rand
Yeah,
single brush.
no. And I mean, like, I don't think we necessarily even go up to those brushes locally. I think like the more expensive ones you can get like brush sets for like 1,000 sort of like thing is sort of like the
Yeah,
cap that I've seen
I,
locally.
and like that, you only buy those if your professional full-time job
Yeah.
is commissioned painting
Yes.
minis. Like that's the only
Yeah.
time you need those. Um,
Yeah.
or you're like trying to get a golden demon or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Otherwise, yeah, just stick. I think basic things out of Herbert Evans and PNA, and then if you're really like so focused, then you can start thinking about like Army Painter or a Games Workshop brush or
Yeah,
etc.
yeah.
Otherwise, stay away from them. You're gonna the first brush you're gonna use is going to be dead by like the end
Yeah.
of the week.
So I have a thing I call the brush graveyard, where it's like
Yes.
in my folder because I got
You're a
one.
dry brush now.
Yeah, exactly. Like you downgrade it to dry brush, and then even then it gets even worse because like
Yes.
dry brush like slowly brittles away.
Mhm.
You are now terrain brush
Yes.
or basing brush for putting
Oh,
basing stuff on a
yeah.
base.
So
Uh,
I mean, that's also an interesting one of like basing. and like all the different things now. Like, I mean, like when we first started, like the only thing that you could do with basing was, you know, you
Like
get yourself some soil and you get yourself some wood glue and you go.
And then you literally just have a little tub of soil and you dip
Yeah.
the wood glue base into the thing. You're like, haha, it's based.
Yeah.
And then you goblin green around the edges.
Goblin green around the edges. Oh, gosh. No. But I mean, like these days there's a lot of actual like basing materials.
And even the Games Workshop basing paint range. I really like those paint ranges.
I like them for certain ones, but I've actually found that the Vallejo one is like half the price for 4 times the volume.
Yes, I agree. In fact, that's what I'm using at the moment. I just, for some reason, referenced the Games Workshop ones. I don't know why.
I mean, it's space ones. I know. They're just like there. And I mean, like the big thing there is I think like the Games Workshop ones have thicker particles in it, so it makes for like their particular style of grim dark and stuff fits perfectly. But if you're doing like I'm trying to think of like bolt action or a Star Warsy or like something there.
Like I've been using the Vallejo base, and then what I do is once I've assembled the model, I'll do that basing on the base. Then I will base coat.
It's all the Spanish stuff just coming together, Greg.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
And well, I'll also add in. Besides the base layer of particulate paint, I'll also add in little rocks and stuff, and you know, like extra gubbins.
And you know, like I think there's an interesting one there of like the rocks and stuff. You don't need to buy the Games Workshop kit for it. You can literally go to like, you know, you can
buy a bag of rocks.
Buy a bag of rocks. Just go to a nursery and get yourself a
P&A. I noticed. I was at a P&A the other day, and they had like a bag of rocks, like I kid you not, this size for like $20.
Yeah,
and it's perfect basing size little rock. It's like, well, I'm set for life for basing if I need to add little rocks.
Exactly. So like you've got all of those things. Cork is a wonderful thing to make use of.
Do you have a good source of cork? Because I can't find anyone who reliably can provide it.
Herbert Evans.
Okay.
Yeah, the one there in Rosebank. They've got like quite a lot of nice. Also, Essex have as well.
Oh, okay.
Like for me, cork is cork. Look in their model train sections.
Okay,
because it's one of the things that's commonly used in model training. Yeah, and speaking of their model train places, perfect for those sort of things because you can get like all sorts of interesting little terrain pieces like paved roads or trees or flocking
or lampposts or like
or go to a aquarium store because like they've got lovely little things for like exotic alien looking things. You can
like cool flora, plants and stuff, and they're actually really good for terrain pieces as well because you buy like a weird looking fish tank rock piece that you then repaint and add a wash, and bam, it's suddenly this cool to rock feature on the alien planet.
I think there's a lot of different things within there and a lot of different stages. As we said, I think online there's always a tutorial, and there's at all levels, and there's even local South Africans if you're out there and wanting to support. I've just started being a patron of a local painter. So
which one? Give them a shout out.
I will. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me.
I put you on the spot. Okay, no, well, don't worry. We'll maybe add it to
we'll put in the link in the show notes.
Check the show notes for our cool painter. I know there's Dobby in Pretoria. I don't know what name his actual painting thing goes by.
It's Wayward
Dragon.
Yeah, and Wayward Brush Studio.
Wayward Brush. Yes, I know his brother. I'm good friends with his brother. They play Infinity.
Yes, he does some great 40K like stuff, like really, really good details, like to the point of having the reflection in the irises of like Warhammer models, which is just insanity to me. So there's a bunch of those. A really nice one, like we've mentioned a couple of times, is Duncan Rhodes. He's got a paint studio these days, and he does a lot of like free videos. And I think he's probably one of the most like patient YouTube instructors that I found. He just goes through the process. He's like, and you can just do this.
He has a real Bob Ross energy, doesn't he?
He does. He really does.
A little color here. Yeah. A great little model.
We'll just paint this diamond here.
Exactly. Freehand paint this diamond. And then inscribe the model's name inside the diamond.
No, so he's really talented with something that I think like you can see he knows his journey that he's taken, and is very willing to show that to people. And I've liked his move to being independent as well, because he's not afraid to be like, this army painter paint is much better for this, or this other thing is much better for these kinds of things. So it's really nice to see. Been finding like more and more like this Squidmar. He's a Nordish guy who does a lot of really interesting stuff, and he does airbrush stuff. He's very good for that. There's this crazy Spanish guy I can't remember the name of now, who does really great oil painting tutorials. I've just been like, I might take the plunge here. So yeah, I think a lot of fun ones in there. It's Angel, who's the guy from Infinity, who does all of their painting, and he's got a bunch of tutorials and stuff out there as well. So all different levels, all different things you can find. I think it's the main thing is just getting your dipping a toe in there and just going for it, and just kind of like looking out there for posts of people who have put their first models up, and just realizing that like everyone's like very supportive of it. So you can paint your thing and be like, give me some suggestions. The Warhammer, it's what the miniature painting Reddit, fantastic for it. You can also
there's even local WhatsApp groups of painting, like it's literally just the sole purpose of the group is when you've painted something cool and you post it, and then people are like, that's a cool thing, or I like your greens, or how did you do that blue streak in his hair, or whatever, and then it's a cool little community. But I think, like you were saying, the most important part and lesson you can take from painting minis, as with any artistic approach, just do it. Like, practice, you do it, get it done. Don't be afraid. It's your first models you're going to compare your first models to a Golden Demon painted model and be like, well, I can't paint. I'm terrible at this.
And no one can, even with that first one. It's impossible. Like, all those guys all started with blodgy marine, or a model airplane that had like none of the like creases in it anymore at the end of the first paint job, and etc. So
like I mean, even me, I consider myself like a casual painter. I don't try and push it up to like a competitive level or a fancy like every single technique to get the perfect paint job. Mostly aim for like a battle ready sort of look. But just from painting lots of models slowly over time, you pick up a lot of nice techniques that just make good looking models on the table, and then even then it's something you can be proud of when you feel them on the table.
And I mean, there's something like really nice, like fielding an army that you've painted that's all come together. Be like, oh, look at my theme, it's come out. Like, this is my special army that I put together. Like, there's a very like personal feeling with that.
So, moral of the story: go paint more. You should be painting now. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not painting, what are you doing with your life? Paint more, and don't be afraid of what the results are. Just accept it and paint the next model, because there's always another model. There always.
Oh, the pile of shame grows ever larger.
I mean, I've been trying to hammer at mine, but I
have a whole bunch of like Chaos Marines that I need to get to. I'm just like, when do we get a new codex?
Owning a 3D printer does not help the pile of shame,
no, it would not.
It wouldn't help the pile of shame. But yeah.
Cool. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Well over time.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. Join us again in 2 weeks, hopefully, where we'll have another episode. If you have any sort of like interesting painting sort of things, feel free to like reach out to us on our social media, etc. We love seeing other people's work and like commenting, like aiding as we can.
So send us pictures of your favorite mini you painted just recently, or even your first mini.
Ooh, we should totally have a competition of worst first mini.
Worst first mini.
Yeah.
I still have most
characterful first mini.
My Fire Warriors have these bold lines along their helmets, and all it is a sprayed black mini, and then I did like one layer of like a vermin brown, and then one layer of the I think it's called vomit brown. And that's it. That's the mini.
Lovely. It's 3 colors, Greg. It's 3 colors.
Sweet colors. The Codex Tau approved. But yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Indeed.
Catch us in 2 weeks, and cheerio.
Ciao.